Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're specifically going to talk about a very swift, very powerful way you can improve your current Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition campaign immediately using a really cool template that was put forward in a fantastic new fantasy in a fantastic new fantasy novel, and it's a palette you can use for your Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition game that is really fantastic, and really just does a great job of of giving you a new option for a new way to run your Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition campaign that really improves things significantly for the player characters. All right, so let's talk about this. So this comes, this palette, this D&D 5th Edition palette that you can apply, this palette that you could apply to your D&D 5th Edition campaign. You could use this for an ongoing campaign. It'll probably take about 2 or 3 sessions to put into place, or you can drop it in on any new campaign. And the palette is called Bands, Bands, all right? And basically, it's the concept that is put forward in Nicholas Eames' Kings of the Wyld. So first of all, I have a book review for you, and I have a book suggestion. So Kings of the Wyld is an absolutely spectacular, brand new fantasy novel. Came out actually, I guess it's not brand new. It came out about 2-3 years ago. It's pretty new on the scene. There's 2 books out already. It's really, really fantastic fantasy novel with a very cool twist and a kind of like a new way to look at fantasy, and it's really brilliant. Now, I'm going to give you the best parts of it in a minute, right? And by the way, no spoilers for Nicholas Eames' Kings of the Wyld in here beyond the concept, right? The general concept that it has. Okay, so what is Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames? So Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames is just a bog standard fantasy novel, okay? That's where it starts, right? Bog standard fantasy novel. Well, what is bog standard fantasy novel? Well, humans, dwarves, elves, right? Everything you would generally expect in a fantasy novel. You know, wizards casting spells, fighters swinging swords, clerics healing people, and rogues stealing stuff, right? And an adventuring group. Okay, that is an adventuring group right there, and they go out and they slay monsters. Okay, nothing new. All that's in Kings of the Wyld, Nicholas Eames. What does he do to make this fresh and to make this really pop, right? Well, the idea is bands. All he does is he says that these adventuring groups, right, he refers to them as bands, B-A-N-D-S. Now, this is already very close to Dungeons & Dragons because if you remember, in 3rd edition, the 3rd edition official miniatures war game, right, that existed within Dungeons & Dragons in 3rd edition referred to adventuring groups as war bands, right? So Nicholas Eames just refers to them as bands, but here's where it gets really interesting, right? So in your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game, in order to do what Nicholas Eames has done, you will simply start referring to your player character adventure group as a band, right? And then you will consider them and interact with them as a musical band, all right? Specifically, like when rock and roll bands were popular, okay? So, I don't know if you remember, but like Def Leppard and, Black Sabbath and AC/DC and, Van Halen, right? These kind of bands, right? And so what Nicholas Eames does is everywhere these adventuring groups go, their fame precedes them, okay? And basically, people eat up their stories the same way that we eat up a band's songs today. And so your player characters will stop being, adventurers, what are you doing in town? You're probably going to burn the tavern down. We don't like you. It will shift them to something which is really fascinating, which is a cool rock band who's arrived, right? And wherever they go, like in every tavern, their meals will be free. And basically, everybody there is there for every story they can tell, right? And the other thing is, like, everybody wants to be around them. They're really cool, right? But it also looks at the adventuring group as the same way you would look at a rock and roll band, right? So one of the things it does require is essentially, you know, every band's got a lyricist, right? It got a lyric. Every band's got a singer, right? Every band's got a guitar, an electric guitar. Every band's got a bass, and every band's got drums, right? So basically, these, you know, it changes the interaction of the town folk, of the nobles, of every thinking, speaking humanoid to these are famous adventurers, right? And, you know, and we're excited about how they're fighting monsters in our area. We're excited about how they're heroes, right? And their exploits, every single quest they do is a new song that we want to hear, right? And we want to rehear it, right? And this really shifts things from your adventurers are no longer unknown dirt farmers. They're famous, right? They are literally rock stars, right? And so when they roll into town, some town members might be like, the innkeeper might be like, oh boy, every time, adventurers show up, my inn like lights on fire, and I gotta hope it doesn't burn to the ground because there was a brawl, right? To like, the tavern's gonna be packed tonight, right? And even to like the idea that when the band, the war band, the adventure group rolls into a city, they'll be fully provisioned, right? As an expectation, right? Like, oh, of course, you need a fresh horse, you're going to get a fresh horse. And and all your provisions will be refreshed. All your healing will be given to you. Because it's like if Van Halen came to your town, right? And it sounds like a small thing, but this transforms Kings of the Wyld from being a bog standard fantasy adventure to being like one of the stories in there is we're getting the band back together, right? And so these guys had become farmers, and one of them was a paramour to a noble, and but they get the band back together, right? And so every adventure, if you watch here, here's what Kings of the Wyld, Nicholas Eames does. You can go watch Sing Street. By the way, Sing Street, 5 out of 5 star movie. It's a real sleeper. Not a lot of people have seen it. It is spectacular, right? But it's the story of a band, and there's all these adventures that bands have in Sing Street. But every single band movie, every single band drama, not so much band documentaries because they're all the same. Wild Success, Drug Addict, and then a crappy album later. But every cool band story, every movie, every book about bands, you could take all the drama that happens for musical bands and all the adventures that happen for musical bands and move them and just layer them right on top of your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game. Kings of the Wyld is spectacular. Sing Street is spectacular. If you put this band's palette over your 5e game, it's going to make your game better. It's fresh. It's new. Nicholas Eames does this at a level, it's truly unique. I've never seen anything like it. This can really make your D&D 5th edition pop. Your players aren't going to see this anywhere else. It's unique and cool. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you read Kings of the Wyld? Or have you seen Sing Street? What do you think of adding this to a D&D 5th edition game? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.